In this video, we are going to see the web map definition, and what we are interested in is the base map definition from that web map definition. We're going to manipulate the JSON for our base map and see how that is reflected in ArcGIS Online. So open up the Basemap JSON.py script from the Basemaps folder. Up top, we have our GIS and map class imports. And we're also going to use the JSON module from the standard Python library so we can print JSON to screen in a more readable fashion. We first access ArcGIS Online. We then use the content manager get method and supply in our web map item ID, which I'm going to paste in right now from my notepad, or you can grab from ArcGIS Online. The get method returns an item object, which will assign to a variable called web map item. We're then going to use our web map item and create a map object, which will assign to a variable called web map. As we've seen already, we can get our web map base map definition from using our web map object, our map object, and accessing the base map manager, and from the base map manager using the base map property. So let's run the script now and see the JSON definition for our current base map. We can see we are returned a dictionary. This dictionary contains two key value pairs. We have our basemapLayers and our title. You can see our title that we set to my basemap title in this section. And for our basemapLayers, the value is a list. And that list contains two layers, which are dictionaries themselves. And those dictionaries define the base map of our current web map. We have a vector tile layer that is our light grey base, and we also have another vector tile layer that is our light grey reference layer. We can see for both of these layers that visibility is set to true and that they both have an opacity of 1.0. Let's head over to ArcGIS Online and check out these two layers for our base maps. Here I'm in ArcGIS Online in our API Python web map. On the left hand side, if I go to Basemap and then click into my Basemap title, we have our two layers. We have our base, which is our light grey base. If I select that, you can see on the right hand side over here we have the properties and that there is no transparency set on this layer. In a couple of examples down the line, we are going to alter that transparency by setting the opacity property for the layer. We can also turn on and off the layers. You can do it manually here by clicking this visibility eye next to each layer. We're going to use the API to manipulate the WebMap JSON to update the visibility for us. So let's head back over to PyScripter. We'll comment out our first example and open up our second example. Here we're just going to print out the entire web map definition as it is as of now. That is the JSON definition for our web map. Here we are calling the getData method on our web map item object. This will return a dictionary, the JSON definition for the current state of our web map. We'll assign that to a variable called webmap item data. We'll then use the JSON module dumps function, where we're going to output our web map item data nice and neat with an indent of 4. So I'll run the script now and we'll see how that output looks. Our script is complete. I scroll on up. In the next section, we are going to be taking a look at this web map JSON definition in a lot more detail and further on into the course. For now, we are interested in the base map property that is returned. We can see that this base map property contains a dictionary, and this has a basemapLayers property. If I scroll down, we can see it has the title property and my basemap title as the value. So you can see here we are accessing the same information as we did in the first example, where we went through the map object, basemap manager object, and the basemap property. This is just a little bit easier to read. So within our basemap property and our basemapLayers property, we have a list defining the two layers from our base map. We can see the first layer is our grey base layer, our light grey base, and then our reference layer sits on top of that. In our next example, we are going to update the visibility of one of these to be false. So when we refresh our map or open our map, that layer of our base map is not turned on. It is not visible. Let me scroll up a bit here so I can see the base map property and the base map layers. And we'll go up and comment out our second example and open up our third example where we're going to set the visibility. So once more, we are getting the WebMap JSON definition using the getData method on our WebMap item object. We'll assign this to a variable called WebMap item data. And from here, we want to dig into that JSON and set the visibility for one of our layers to be false, one of our basemap layers. So we need to access the JSON definition, which we do via our WebMap item data variable. Now, what property do we want to access? As we see down below, we want to access the basemap property. And we know this basemap property has two properties of its own, basemap layers and title. We are, of course, interested in the basemap layers. And if we take a look at the basemap layers, we can see that it is a list. And from this list, we want the first layer definition of that list. So we access that like we do any other list with an index of 0. Within that layer definition, we can see there is a property called visibility. We want to set that to equal false. So we want to set visibility to be false. Now we need to commit that change, and we do so by overwriting the current definition with our new definition. And we do that through a property called text. We create a dictionary called WebMap items property, and we use one key in there called text, and we assign our updated WebMap item data as the value. We then call the update method for our item object, and we set the item properties parameter to be our WebMap item properties. So the only property that is updating is the visibility for the first layer in our basemap layers that we're setting to false. We'll assign the calling of the update method to a variable called status and print status to screen. Printing the status will either return true, that the update was successful, or false, that there was a failure. So let's run our script. We can see that we were returned true, indicating that our update was successful. So let's head over to ArcGIS Online and check it out. At the moment, our light grey base is visible, but when we refresh this page, we will hope that our update was indeed successful and that this layer is turned off. So let's refresh the page, and we can see that is exactly what happened. I go back into the Basemap tab on the left and click into my Basemap. We can see that the light grey base has been turned off. Visibility is not on. Let's head back over to PyScripter. We'll comment out that example and we'll do one last example. Here we are getting the JSON definition for our web map through our WebMap item object, and we're assigning this to a variable called WebMap item data. We know this returns a dictionary defining the WebMap JSON definition. We saw in the previous example that we access our WebMap item data and we are interested in the basemap property. This basemap property has a basemap layers property that contains a list of layers for our basemap. We want to access the first layer, and this time we're going to set visibility back to true. We're also going to update the opacity to 0.5, so 50% transparency. And we saw earlier on in this video that there was no transparency set on this layer. As we saw in the previous example, we then create an item properties dictionary and we set text to be our updated WebMap item data. We then use the update method for our item object to update our web map and commit the changes. So we should see our light grey base layer, visibility turned back to true with an opacity of 0.5. So let's run the script. Our script is complete. We'll head back over to ArcGIS Online. Before I refresh, I'm going to check the properties for our light grey base. On the right hand side, we can see transparency is 0% and that visibility is false for our light grey base. Let's refresh the page. We can see our light grey base has been turned back on. I'll click back into Basemap and into the current Basemap, and we'll go over to the properties, and we can see there has been a 50% transparency applied to our Basemap, just the light grey base. If I click into light grey reference, we can see that still has 0% transparency. In this video, we saw how we could manipulate the WebMap JSON definition to update properties of our basemap layers. This concept of manipulating the WebMap JSON is very important for automating workflows using the ArcGIS API for Python. Throughout this course, we are going to see two different ways to update our web maps. One via the map object and two via the item object. When we update via the map object, we use methods and properties associated with the map object. And when we update via the item object, we manipulate the JSON definition for our web map.